Hello, figments of my imagination. So the Phyrexia set releases on Arena in a week, but there's an early access going on, I think, Thursday. As of now, I don't have an invite to it. I didn't figure I'd get one. It's not like I make that much Magic content, but either way, I've had a bunch of deck ideas all centered around a single card, Venerated Rotpriest, and I wanted to just put this out before that event, so anyone who's in it, maybe they could experiment with some of these decks, see how they run, see if there's any changes they want to make to them while they have access to everything. Personally, if I get into the event, I'll just be jamming different versions of this deck. If I don't, then I'll still be playing it when the set releases on Arena on Tuesday. So I'm going to go over every format, well, the big three, Standard, Modern, Legacy. Mainly, I'm going to be focused on Standard, though. So here I have these are all just different options that I put here as a brainstorming mechanism for myself. The list here will be public, and I'll include a link to it down below so anyone could take it and see all the different options I was thinking through if they want to have a little stepping stone for themselves. I'm not going to go over all the cards, but I'll just cover the basic categories. The combo is just the two pieces that I believe should be in every version of the deck, at least in Standard, Rotpriest and March. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. And obviously this ability triggers off your own spells, your opponent's spells, and it stacks with itself, which is why you want to play March of Burgeoning Life. The spell's pretty awkwardly worded. The X has to be higher than the creature. Since you could pitch one card to make X2, you can't copy a 2-drop by doing that. You still have to spend one more mana or pitch another card. But in this deck, we only care about copying a 1-drop. So this essentially will get us extra copies of Rotpriest so that we easily kill our opponent. It conveniently also targets and is a spell, so it will trigger the Rotpriest itself. The combo part 2 is just, if you're building a blue version, there's different things you can do. These are all targets, or things that target multiple times, so you get multiple triggers off one spell. These are cards that benefit you when the opponent's poisoned. Some ramp spells, reanimation. These are search options, very important because the number one crux to any combo deck is finding the combo piece that's important. There's plenty of options for that. I included basically everything that can find Rotpriest. If you want to find them in a more traditional sense, we have cantrips. I pulled anything that targets a creature and draws a card up to 2 mana cost, and then I included 3 mana cost cards that can be reduced somehow, like this one for controlling a zombie, this one for controlling a vampire, and this one I included because it targets 2 things. Dig spells, it's the same as tutors, just worse, obviously. The whole point here is to try and find the Rotpriest. These were the best options I found. Protection, the main spells you're going to play are Safekeeping and Tyvar's Stand. You can play them in any green deck. They're green cards, so you can pitch them to March. But if you need more protection, then the other colors you might play offer these options. The Maybe board is full of all sorts of cards that I considered for different reasons, some of which are just pieces, just little odds and ends. So without further ado, I'm going to go to the first deck I have, and that is Ivy plus Rotpriest. So I want to start by saying all these decks, they're obviously rough deck lists. Haven't gotten to test them yet. The sideboards, if they have a sideboard, it's just a collection of cards I could have played. It has nothing to do with an actual sideboard. If the sideboard actually does matter, I'll mention it. The goal of this version of the deck is beyond just the combo to also, you're basically a hybrid deck where your other plan is just to get some value from Ivy and beat them down with either Ledge Shredder or Storm Chaser Drake. I mean, Rotpriest can get in there too, but unlikely. You have 4 combat research to help facilitate that. Very good with Ivy out. The rest of the deck is all instants. You have Experimental Augury, helps dig for Rotpriest, Ivy, whatever you need, and also proliferates, so it can help kill them. 2 Impulse, more digging, so you can find what you need. 4 Marches, 2 blue Marches, just more protection and multi-target. Same as Safekeeping and Tyvar Stand. Wrap it up with 22 lands. The Singleton Myrics probably is not a great idea, honestly. We seem to need a lot of colored mana, but I slipped it in there because I'm going to want to try it out. So that's it for this version. Next one I have is another blue-green one, but this one's more focused on just the combo itself. Just cut down to only 3 Ivies, no other creatures but Rotpriest. The goal here is just to find a Rotpriest, protect it, and make copies of it. Get an Ivy if possible. To facilitate that, we have 4 Experimental Augury, again. Impulse, looks at top 4. 4 Marches, again, combo with Rotpriest. 2 blue Marches for protection, 2 Shore Up for extra protection, 4 Safekeeping, and 4 Tyvar Stand. I do want to mention that I'm using Shore Up instead of Slip Out the Back. The reason for that is that Slip phases out, so if you're doing something like, if you attempt to March your Rotpriest and your opponent responds by killing it, if you slip out the back, then you counter your March because it phases out, but if you Shore Up, it counters their kill spell and your March still resolves. I think Slip Out the Back is a better card, but because of how the deck is going to play, I assume, where you're going to be protecting your Rotpriest with one of your spells on the stack, you typically don't want to phase them out. I make an exception for March of Swirling Mist because it multi-targets. Because of the nature of this deck, I ran 24 lands instead of 22. I think you need to more consistently hit your land drops, especially in a deck where you have a 4-drop you want to resolve, and a spell with flashback 5 that you want to cast. Next up, we have the Jund build. So this build is more of a mid-range type deck. You're attempting to get value out of different cards you have, particularly the synergies with Tyvar and Blood Tithe Harvester. Tyvar also makes all of your Loam Speakers into real cards. You can immediately activate them. You can kill your opponent surprisingly quickly by animating 2 lands a turn, swinging in for 6. That can become more than a lot of people can handle very quickly. I put a single Cankerbloom in here. You can reanimate it, and you can use it to proliferate, and it ticks up in the Tyvar and also gives them a poison counter. Or you can use it if needed to destroy an artifact or enchantment. I was considering playing more than one, so you can march it, but it's more of a sideboard card, and I'd want to see how well it plays. I mean, it does seem like a very good card, especially in a deck like this. So as the creatures, for instance, we have Blade Brand. Cantrips, it's relatively cheap. The Death Touch will come in handy, I assume. March, of course. Safekeeping and Stand, of course. 23 lands. Probably should try and fit a Myrex in here too, honestly. It seems like a decent enough card. 4 Tyvar, 4 Dig Up is the searching spell I went with. I was trying to make a version using Diabolic Intent, but it just balancing effects that create enough creatures such that you can cast Diabolic Intent reliably on turn 2 or 3, and still having enough spells to target is kind of a fine line to walk. And I feel like Standard's probably slow enough that you can afford to just cast a Dig Up. Plus this has the added utility of just early game. You can just grab a land and go ahead and smooth out your mana like that. And because of that, I can get away with running 23 lands. 2 copies of Mishra's Command, it's a multi-target spell, has a few useful modes. We can discard some extra stuff, or we can kill a Planeswalker, kill a creature, kill both, whatever we need to do. Next up, we have the Naya version. This version is more of just a creature deck. There's no other way to put this. I don't really have high hopes for this one. I don't think it's that good, honestly. Thought here was that the Illuminator kind of works like to help us dig. Like that's our ideal target. Like we have a Rotpriest out and we target him with the spells. Has the added benefit of Tyvar Stand becoming a real threat then, since he has Double Strike. But beyond that, it doesn't seem that good. I mean, we have the Defector Might. We have Rocco to search out Rotpriest. I included 1 Extraction Specialist because Rocco can just search that out too if we have enough mana. And that gives us a Rotpriest and another 3/2 to block or what have you. This 1 Complete Devotion is just to try it out. We have 2 creatures with Toxic, and the Might can give anyone Toxic. Maybe I should play more copies, I'm not sure. Honestly, it seems like this deck doesn't really need red, so I was considering just cutting the red cards. The only red cards are the Ancestral Anchor to draw cards, and the Mishra's Command to multi-target. And that's fine, but I could see possibly just playing more white cards or green cards. Just 2 copies of March, because I don't really think you're comboing with this version that often. But that could be wrong as well. Like I said, this is the version I have the least confidence in. It'll probably be the last version I try, honestly. I don't think this is very good. I think blue and black provide too many good options. I just wanted to have at least 1 build with Rocco in it, because I do think that's interesting that you can play Rocco and search up Rotpriest. Gives you a pretty direct tutor. And that was it for the standard builds, so now we're moving on to modern. So slight disclaimer here, I have not played modern in any real sense since Modern Horizons 1 came out. That was the last time I actually played Modern, which I'm now realizing is, oh man, that was almost 4 years ago now. Well, that's the last time I played Modern, but so this is the first version, which is a hybrid. It's a hybrid of 2 combo decks, the Niv-Magus deck, which kind of wants the same cards that we want anyways, and Rotpriest, obviously. A few of the card choices are different to facilitate Rotpriest, but if needed, and if your opening hand calls for it, you can just go with Niv-Magus instead. The upside of playing the version like this is you have safekeeping to keep him safe. Creatures, obviously the 2 combo creatures, and the Wild Cantor. Wild Cantor's here because as long as this is in the deck, you can Summoner's Pact for effectively 1 extra storm count. You can also use it if you desperately need to change your mana color. Shouldn't happen often, but can come up, especially in decks that run so few lands. And obviously this deck revolves around Ground Rift. That was everyone's first thought when Rotpriest was spoiled, and obviously we're going to run it. Niv-Magus also is a fan of Ground Rift. You can eat all the extra storm copies and get them really large. We're running 3 Ripe Shots in this version. Feeds off the Niv-Magus Elemental plan and also works with Rotpriest. The copies don't need to resolve, they just need to target, and you get the Rotpriest triggers and they'll die. And 2 Assault Strobe for facilitating Niv-Magus. Makes it really easy to kill them. I could see a world where this should be Timur Battle Rage, So I have it over here in the sideboard, and maybe it should be, but 1 mana is 1 mana. 18 lands, keeping it low. 4 Gut Shot, 4 Lava Dart. The Gut Shot because it's free and has good utility. The Lava Dart because it's 2 spells for 1. 4 March, we're still sticking with the combo there. 4 Mutagenic Growth, again, free spell. 4 Summoner's Pact, free spell, yet again, and finds Rotpriest or Wild Canter for Desperate. And 4 Tamiyo's Safekeeping. I will say, I haven't tested this deck, but just drawing Goldfish hands, this thing can kill a Goldfish, like, really fast. Like, if you just assume they have nothing, you can kill them on turn 2 very easily. Turn 3 kills are significantly more common. Again, not sure if it's good enough, especially in a world where there's a lot more free spells now. I know that there's the creature that's a Swords to Plowshares, and I think the red one like deals 4 damage to creatures. Things like that could be a problem for this deck, because they don't trigger Rotpriest, and they're free. But something to consider. I hadn't seen anyone combine Niv-Magus Elemental into the package, so that's why I wanted to look at that one. Next up, we just have the straight-up combo version, like we're only winning with Rotpriest. Niv-Magus is basically swapped out for Spellskite here. The advantage here is if we can get 2 Spellskites out with a Rotpriest, you actually can essentially win the game, because this will actually come up, especially with March. You can March on your Spellskite. You'll have to either pitch 2 green cards or pitch 1 green card and pay 1 extra mana. So if you have 2 Spellskites out and a Rotpriest, this will make this easier actually. So you take this Gut Shot, and you target Spellskite 1. You get a trigger, right? And then with the Gut Shot still in the stack, you redirect it to this Spellskite. You let that resolve, so Gut Shot's now targeting this Spellskite, which means you'll get another Rotpriest trigger. And then you repeat that until you've given them 10 poison and they die, which means you need to redirect it a total of 9 times. Now granted, that is 18 life, so you're really living life on the edge there, but the point is that combo exists, and even without that combo existing, Spellskite is also just a great card in this deck where you have a key piece that you need to protect. And the Wild Canter in this version is here for the same reason as the other version. If you desperately need to filter your mana and you have a Summoner's Pact, or you desperately need 1 extra Storm Count and you have a Summoner's Pact, she's your girl. Okay, as for the actual spells, 1 Gather Courage, I cut a Mutagenic Growth for this, because in this version, you will realistically should only be casting these spells with a Rotpriest out, which means you have 1 creature to tap. You could run more, but that could get awkward if you only have 1 Rotpriest and you draw 2 Gather Courage. It's just to save you a small amount of life, which could definitely come in handy in a very hostile metagame. 3 Gut Shots, it's fine. It's not my favorite of the free spells in this deck, honestly. Lava Dart, same reason, 2 targets. Metamorphose, so we're effectively running a 56 card deck. Adds a Storm Count, can actually be useful for changing your mana, but most of the time it's just the Storm Count and the fact that we're running a smaller deck now. March, of course, full 4. I think this is what you want to be doing, and it's part of the reason why you run more of the green spells. Mutagenic Growth. Well, these numbers are wrong. This should actually be 4, and this should be 2. Yeah. I did this edit earlier, but it didn't save. Only 2 Gut Shots. You need to make sure you have a good number of green spells that you can actually pitch them. That's another reason why Metamorphose is actually good. So yeah, you just want to make sure you have a good enough number of green cards for March to work. Similar to how Force of Will and Legacy, they say you should have like 18 blue cards or something like that. 4 Mutagenic Growth, 4 Summoner's Pact, 2 Tamiyo's Safekeeping. I feel like with the Spellskites, you don't really need this. I still included 2 because it's kind of like a gotcha. It's possible that you just run the full 4 and slow down the deck a little bit. The thought is this slot would be something like Pact of Negation, but Pact of Negation is a little awkward because it doesn't target. But on the other hand, like, if you have Ground Rift, you don't need the targets. It's kind of a game there between, do you need targeting spells like Tamiyo's Safekeeping, or is the Storm Count going to be enough? Or are you always going to be able to have a Ground Rift or a Grape Shot? So maybe you run more Grape Shots and less targeting spells and more things like Pact of Negation. 18 lands, probably a little high for a deck like this, honestly. In this version, I ran Grove with Burn Willows because we don't care about our opponent's life total. Just 2 of them, though. We still want to be able to have a Mountain most of the time because we're going to cast at least 1 Lava Dart, I assume. 1 Grape Shot and 4 Ground Rift. Grape Shot just basically being a worse Ground Rift here. We're never targeting it at the opponent, we're targeting at our creatures. Strike it rich, 3 of them. I think maybe I should even cut a land for the 4th one. It basically lets you bank mana, or if you're going off, filter your red mana to green, or just filter your mana into Storm Count. But if it's a slower game, you can obviously flash it back and build up a little bit of treasure tokens. I mentioned the sideboards don't really matter, but one thing I do want to point out is Dosan the Falling Leaf. Again, I'm not perfectly familiar with Modern anymore, but I do think that in the past I've had this as like a secret, almost, tech card in a few green combo-y decks. I like to play janky decks like this all the time. And when you have a way to search for it, this can be an incredibly strong card. Obviously, it can backfire, since you have the Summoner's Pact for it, but it's an option to consider. Endurance, same kind of thing. You can Summoner's Pact for it, which means if you're playing against a deck that needs the graveyard, It's a perfect sideboard card. And things like that. Green creatures with a lot of utility are obviously what you want to be looking for in summoners packs. Next up, we have what I call the slow version. This one you're relying even more on Ground Rift and Lava Dart. You really don't have that many target your own things. Again, this is the kind of deck I'm not even sure if this is actually good. The whole thought was to be like a Chord deck. Yeah, I really don't think this version is good. Obviously, this would need so much tuning by someone who actually knows the modern format at this point. This is definitely more of a jumping off point. It's not remotely close to playable, I'd assume. Like if I just leave this up on MTGO, I would assume it would be an 0-5. I will say that I think there's something here. Ranger Captain Vios is a powerful card, being able to silence your opponent, and he searches up the Rotpriest. Maybe just ignore all the dumb things, just play 4 of this. Have Ranger Vios so you can get 2 Rotpriests and do funky things with your Chord of Callings. But all in all, I don't think this version's that good. Basically, like the plan here is to set up a hand with like 2 Rotpriests in it, and then have a Ground Rift and win the game. Not really a winning strategy, but something that, hey, maybe someone can do something with this idea. And then last, and certainly least, we're going to move on to Legacy. Legacy is a format that's near and dear to my heart, but again, it's a format I have not played in a long time. And last time I was playing it, I was playing lands, so not really caring too much about what my opponents would do. So what we have here is essentially Charbelcher, but you don't need to own LEDs for it. So on the plus side, the price is a little lower. Not much though. Fast mana, we have Lotus Petal and Chrome Mox. We also have 3 other Spirit Guides. Really didn't want to add the 4th one. We still have the Wild Canter. We have the actual Rotpriest, and then Tenderwall. Obviously turns 1 green into 2 red. What's not to love? 4 Summoners back still, because what's more fun than losing the game after your opponent Force of Wills whatever you search for? 3 March of Burgeoning Life. We don't really want to get flooded here, I don't think. 4 Metamorphose, just make our deck smaller. I probably should have played 4 Gitaxian Probe too, actually. Is that banned in Legacy? I don't think it is. Holy crap, is that actually banned in Legacy? Hold on, I gotta do a quick Google search over here. Wow. Gitaxian Probe is banned in Legacy. You know, I always joked that should happen. When did that happen? 2018. Did I play any events then? I don't know. That's funny. Well, scratch all that then. 10 lands. We have the fast mana. The Dried Arbor's not really a land, but we can get it with Green Sun Zenith. You know, the old trick. Okay, we've got 4 Gamble. Search out our Ground Rift or any combo piece we need at the time. Obviously, there's the risk of discarding it, but just get good. I don't know. 4 Green Sun Zenith finds Rotpriest, finds Arbor, finds Tenderwall. Exactly what we want. 3 Ground Rift. You'll see why in a minute, but obviously we know what this does. 4 Burning Wish to find the other Ground Rift or Grape Shot if needed, and 4 Land Grant so that our lands have Storm. Yeah, this is just bad Charbelcher. So don't play this unless you really want to like just light some tickets on fire or something. Plus side is it's probably pretty cheap on like MTGO, and so it could be a fun like little meme deck. You can optimize it a little better. Belcher would just be better in like every way, but you know, maybe there's a reason to play this. So that's it. Let me know if I missed any interesting cards in the comments, specifically for Standard. I'm sure I missed something in Modern and definitely missed something in Legacy. This monstrosity. It's just maybe I'll actually just build this online and torture myself with it for a few matches. Suffer for what I've done by building this horrible deck. Leave any feedback on any of the decks below. Interact with this video however you feel. And I will see you all eventually.